Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Alright, inshallah, guys, we will start soon. We're just going to let some people log on as people are discovering the live feed, inshallah. Just to review really quickly, my apologies. Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. As always, we begin by praising Allah, sending our peace and blessings on the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. So last week we covered in the Fiqh of Ramadan, number one, the obligation of fasting the month, some of the benefits of fasting in Ramadan, when does the month of Ramadan start and how that is calculated, how do we start and end the fast in each day, how that is begun and calculated. So this video was we did this session last week for the first part. So if you missed any of the topics that I'm listing now, you can go through our feed, inshallah, find the one from last Sunday and review that, inshallah ta'ala, or we can take questions at the end. But we did cover how to start and end the fast in the day of Ramadan. We covered who was obligated to fast, who was exempt from fasting, and we covered the suhoor, the morning meal, and the sunnah of having that suhoor in the morning time. We covered iftar, when we break our fast, and some of the virtues and sunnahs around it. So today, inshallah ta'ala, hopefully we're going to get through all of this. We're going to cover, probably the largest chunk will be what breaks the fast. What is it that will actually break your fasting? And how you make up the days, if you have to make up a day for fasting, or how you pay the fidya, or what is the fidya, etc. That you have to pay in order for making up a missed day if you fall into that category. We'll talk a little bit about what ruins the fast spiritually, and then inshallah, hopefully we'll get to cover a little bit of Taraweeh and a little bit about Zakatul Fitr, inshallah ta'ala, so we can be ready for this month in terms of being mindful of what the rituals are, what we're supposed to do, and avoid what we're not supposed to do. And then inshallah at the end, if you guys have any questions, and I have a list of some common questions that people have asked, we will go over, inshallah ta'ala, those as well. So inshallah we'll begin with what breaks the fast. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So again, we're aware that when we start our fasting, we're supposed to abstain from certain things, right? And those certain things are in the daytime, eating, drinking, or anything that is considered eating and drinking or has the benefits of eating and drinking, and intercourse as well. So intimacy with our spouses is one other area that we're supposed to avoid in the daytime. So the first thing I want to cover, inshallah ta'ala, is the fact that intercourse during the daytime does break the fast. And what must be done in order to compensate for that? Number one, the day must be made up. So every time you're missing a day of fasting, if you're capable of fasting later on in the year, you will make up the day of fasting. But for breaking the fast by intentionally having intercourse during the days of Ramadan, there's also an extra penalty that must be paid, and that is called the kafara. Quran, the kafara, the expiation for that is, number one, freeing a slave. If one cannot free a slave, then the second one is fasting for 2 consecutive months. صِيَامُ شَهْرَيْنِ مُتَتَابِعَيْنِ 2 consecutive months of fasting. Excuse me. And if one is not physically capable of doing that, then إِطْعَامُ سِتِّينَ مِسْكِينَ, then it is feeding 60 people. So basically, one person for each day of 2 consecutive months of fasting. This was narrated in a hadith where a man came to the Prophet ﷺ and he confessed that he had committed this sin in the days of Ramadan. He had intercourse with his wife, and then so the Prophet ﷺ told him, "Are you able to free a slave?" And he said, "No, I can't afford to do that." Then he said, "Are you able to fast 2 consecutive months?" And he said, "No, I'm not physically capable of doing that." And so he said, "Then can you feed 60 poor people?" And he said, "No, I'm not financially capable of even doing that." And so the Prophet ﷺ kind of let him go. And then somebody brought in a bunch of dates. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, "Call that person back." And he gave him the dates, and he said, "Take these dates and hand them out as sadaqah to the poor people, right? As an expiation, because you couldn't do even these three things, hand them out as an expiation. And he said, there is no one in this city that is poorer than my family, meaning we are already in need ourselves. And so the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, he laughed. He laughed at this and he said, that's fine, give it to your family. And spend it for them. And so you see a couple of things here. Number one, from the fiqh side, you see the order of expiation that's supposed to take place. So freeing a slave, fasting 2 consecutive months, feeding 60 people, if you cannot do the one that is above. And again, this is only for the person that has intercourse during the day and breaks their fasting through that means. And so we see that order of events. But we also see something really interesting in the interaction that the Prophet ﷺ is having with a person who has intentionally broken their fast in a way that demands them to not only make up the day, but to pay a compensation. So this is a sin. This is a sin that has been committed, right? Purposefully breaking the fast in the day of Ramadan. And the Prophet ﷺ is using a solution-based approach. A solution-based approach. He's not going into too many details as to why it happened. Now he's focused on getting him past this point and to the next step. And when he realizes that this is a person that can't even meet the qualifications to fulfill the expiation, he's offered something to give in sadaqah as a sadaqah. And when he says, I can't eat, there's no one poorer than me to give it to, then he takes it home to his family. So you see, subhanAllah, a lot of compassion and flexibility from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in terms of applying the rules here. But you also see the dealing that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had with someone who had intentionally broken their fast. It was a solutions-based approach. And you want to just kind of use that beautiful example of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam when we deal with people that commit sin. SubhanAllah, there's many interesting things you learn from the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's the first thing that breaks the fast, and what must be done after that is done. Again, it's a sin. We should not do it. We should avoid it. But if somebody has intercourse during the days of Ramadan intentionally, they make up the day and they have to pay the kafara for that act. So the second thing that kind of comes off of this is any releasing of seminal fluids, right, from the private parts. And this is also something we have to be familiar with. It breaks the fast, right? So doing anything, being involved in any way, shape, or form, in releasing your seminal fluid. So masturbation is one of those things. Looking at images or etc., things like that are going to cause you to release any kind of seminal fluids, that absolutely does break your fast. But the kafara, the expiation, is only for intercourse. So for anything else that breaks your fast, you have to make up the day. So if you're being intimate with your spouse, but not to the length of intercourse, and then you have any release of seminal fluid, you will make up the day as well. But these releasing intentional release of seminal fluids does break the fast, and the exemption here is if it's out of one's control. So during sleep, or it just happens and it wasn't in your control, then it's excused. It does not break your fast, and you do not have to make up the day. And again, the kafara is only for intercourse. Okay, wanted to get that out of the way. Now we're going to talk about the other things that break your fast. Next, obviously, is eating or drinking intentionally. Eating or drinking intentionally. This is the second thing we're going to cover now when it comes to the things that break your fast. If you eat or drink out of forgetfulness, then this is something that is excused. It does not break your fast. Even though you took something in your mouth and you took water or food in your mouth. This is due to the hadith in Sahih Bukhari from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Man nasiya wa huwa sa'im, fa'akala aw shariba falyatimma sawmahu, fa innama at'amahu Allahu wa saqahu." That whoever forgets and eats or drinks while fasting should finish their fast, as it was Allah who nourished them in the first place. It was Allah who gave them to eat, and it was Allah who gave them to drink. And so, subhanallah, sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intervenes, makes you forget, and allows you to have a sip of water or a morsel of food. And this is from the mercy and rahmah and blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a gift in the days of Ramadan when you're supposed to be fasting, but Allah makes you forget to the point where you actually eat. And He says this is Allah who fed him, Allah who gave them to drink. And so don't beat yourself up if you forget and you take a sip of water or you drink or you eat something in the days of fasting. Rather, just say Alhamdulillah, continue your fasting, because it was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself that intervened and cause you to do that. So there's not a cause to beat yourself up. If it was an unintentional, you forgot, just don't freak out. Continue with your fasting. There's no need to make anything up. Eating or drinking also just includes taking anything into your throat or stomach, right? So anything that will reach your throat or stomach generally will break the fast. That includes water reaching your throat from the nose, and the Prophet ﷺ discouraged people from taking water during wudu too deep into the nose while they're fasting, right? Um, so you don't want that water to go into your throat. And again, just let's be practical here, right? All of us, hopefully, when we make wudu, I don't think we're taking water so deep into our noses that we're actually drinking that water down our throat, right? It's kind of disgusting, isn't it? But I think we're pretty careful in general about not getting that water going down the throat. But it is a possibility, so just be extra cautious in your fasting days. That when you take water in your nose for wudu, you're not going as deep even as you normally go, and just as a habit, if you have a habit of doing that, don't, stop. Don't let the water go down to your throat anyways. It's just kind of weird. It's going through your nose and in your throat. Ugh, not something you want to do. Any form of nourishment that you receive through the veins, including blood, that will break your fast. So there are two types of things here we want to talk about. Number one, we talked about those that are exempt from fasting. And those are number one, people that are sick. So if you need to have an IV plugged into your arm, giving you nourishment, replacing the food and water that you're not getting from eating and drinking in your body, you should not be fasting in the first place. You're sick, right? You're ill. You're in the hospital for treatment. You're getting an IV put into your arm. You don't need to be fasting, right? You make up the day later. If that's not something that's going to change, then you would just pay the fidya, which is feeding a poor person for each day. We talked about that last week. We'll talk maybe a little bit about that again towards the end when we talk about making up days. But any form of anything that is nourishing to your body, that will break your fast, whether you take it through the mouth or whether it's given to you through your veins. And blood is considered a form of nourishment, so if you are receiving blood, that would break your fast. Now again, if you need to receive blood, that means you're likely sick and you should not be fasting in the first place. You should be making those days up later and dealing with your sickness right now. Any injections that are not nourishing, but they're used for regulating your body and curing and all this kind of stuff, they do not break your fast. The number one example of that is insulin. Taking insulin is not a replacement for the food and water that your body needs, etc. So that will not break your fast. And consult our Muslim doctors. Inshallah, we have the workshop coming on the 18th. But for more specifics on certain kinds of things, shots that you need to take. But this is if it's nourishing, then it'll break your fast. If it's not nourishing, it won't break your fast. So a lot of the stabilizers people need for their illnesses are not actually nourishing. Now, if you're taking medication, pills that you're going to be putting into your mouth and down your throat, that is considered eating. The mouth is a passageway for food, and it is a passageway for taking that food into your body. So that is considered eating. That will break your fast. But if you can regulate your medication times, right, to be at suhoor and at maghrib time, if that's possible, then you can make that adjustment. If it's not possible and the medication you need is absolutely needed, because if you don't take that medication, your health will get worse, your illness will get worse, then you are excused from fasting because you are considered ill and you are considered sick. If you can make those days up later, that's better. And one of the things the fuqaha suggest is making up the days in the winter time when the days are shorter, so then you can actually adjust your window of medication if you can. And again, if you absolutely cannot, because you need that medication to regulate your health, on a more continuous basis throughout the day, you are considered someone that is ill that will not get well soon, and you would just pay the fidya, which is again feeding a poor person for each day. So again, that's just some things with regards to eating and drinking intentionally. And again, if you do that unintentionally, your fast is fine. If you do it intentionally, you have to make up the day or pay you have to make up the day, right? If you break your fast intentionally. Losing a lot of blood or giving blood is also considered something that breaks your fast. And that's again at large quantities, larger than normal. That would break your fast. Again, if you lose a lot of blood, you're probably not going to be feeling very well. You're going to be sick. You need treatment and cure and care. So again, you do not need to be fasting then, anyways. And hijama or when you get the blood drawn out from your body. There are different opinions amongst the scholars on this. The safest one again is that it does break the fast. So avoid that in the days of Ramadan. Something else that breaks the fast is intentional vomiting. If you vomit intentionally, that will break your fast. If you vomit unintentionally, it will not. Again, you're kind of noticing, hopefully, inshallah, a pattern here. Eating and drinking intentionally will break your fast. Releasing seminal fluids intentionally will break your fast. If it happens unintentionally, it will not break your fast. So hopefully you're seeing the pattern here about the things that break your fast, and whether or not it's most times is dependent on if they're done intentionally or unintentionally. And the reason we say intentional vomiting breaks the fast is because of a hadith narrated by Imam Abu Dawood, where the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man dhara'ahu qay'un wa huwa sa'imun falaysa alayhi qada' wa in istaqa'a falyaqdi." That if one is fasting and he's suddenly overcome by vomit, then it will not. There's no need to make up the day. Meaning the fast is still valid. There's no need to make up the day. But if they themselves make themselves vomit, then they have to make up the day. They have to make up, meaning they broke their fast. They have to now make up the day later on in the year. So intentional vomiting does break the fast. All right, some common questions that come here, and I think this is pretty much it for things that actually break your fast. And we'll take more questions, but I do want to address certain questions that commonly come up during the days of Ramadan in our times. Inhalers. Does taking an inhaler break your fast? The fuqaha have said no. The inhaler does not break your fast. It's not nourishing. It's a stabilizing, regulating type of medication. It's not nourishment. You're not eating or drinking anything, and so an inhaler will not break your fast. If you have to get a gastroscopy done during the days of fasting, it will not break your fast. Again, you're not eating or drinking anything likely, and that should not break your fast. And again, if there's anything that accompanies it that is considered nourishing, that would break your fast. But again, if you need to take something, some water, along whatever with the procedure, and that procedure has to get done, you probably have an illness that you have to deal with. If you're confused about it, just make up the day later. But inshallah, gastroscopy will not break your fast. Receiving oxygen does not break your fast. We breathe in and out all the time. It's a question people ask. We give the answer to it, right? So when you breathe in, you're taking in oxygen anyway. So if you're receiving oxygen, it's not eating or drinking. That will not break your fast. We mentioned insulin will not break your fast. Questions come up about nasal sprays, eye drops, ear drops, etc. With nasal sprays, because of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, when he said, don't take water so much into your nose that if it goes into your throat, that can break your fast, etc. So for nasal sprays, if nothing reaches the throat, it's fine. It can be used. And I think more often than not, you're probably not getting, something going into your nose and then down your throat and then down into your stomach. But if nothing is reaching the throat from the nasal spray, then you should be fine. Eye and ear drops are okay. Eyes and ear drops are okay. Again, these are issues that you will find differing opinions of the scholars on, but they say eye and ear drops are okay. Again, some of them caution if you find anything in your throat because of an eye or ear drop, that could possibly break your fast. But again, these are not, your eyes and ears are not avenues which you take in, commonly food and stuff from. Even the nose, because of the hadith is mentioned, that's why we have it, but we don't have any nas or any text on eyes and ears except what the fuqaha have said in the past. But eye and ear drops should be fine. They should be okay. Again, if any of this can be avoided during the day of Ramadan, avoid it. If you can regulate the times when you take it in the before Fajr, after Maghrib, just regulate the times just to be cautious anyways. But again, eye and ear drops should be okay, especially if you're not finding anything in your throat. And the question came up about inhalers. We mentioned inhalers are okay. Inhalers do not break your fast. They do not come up in the category of eating or drinking. You're not taking any nourishment through them, and it's a medication that's helping you regulate, and it is important. But you're not eating or drinking anything in that time. These are some of the common questions that come up with the things that we have to, put spray, etc., in our faces in these days. And so if you have allergies and you take some kind of nasal spray, things like that, it should be fine as long as you don't find that going down your throat. Some other beneficial advice, again, don't take in too much water when making wudu, just to try to avoid that. and when you're especially when you're rinsing your mouth and your nose. The miswak will not break your fast, so you can use the Prophet ﷺ used to use the miswak while he was fasting. Brushing your teeth again will not break your fast, and the scholars just say, just don't swallow the water or the toothpaste, right? And so I think for most of us, when we brush our teeth, I don't think we're swallowing the toothpaste in the water anyways. If you are, just get out of that habit anyways. It's probably not a good idea. But again, you can brush your teeth. You can use a lesser amount of toothpaste if that makes you feel better. But you're absolutely allowed to brush your teeth, use toothpaste, etc. Just rinse your mouth out well and don't swallow, what you're rinsing your mouth off with and the toothpaste, etc. Some other beneficial advice, especially during the days of fasting, is about utilizing our time. And so we're going to kind of transition now into what ruins the fast spiritually. So these are things that don't break your fast, but they kind of render your effort a little, either useless or damaged or etc. etc. So wasting time during the days of Ramadan, doing things that are just engaging in too much waste of time and useless things, useless activities is not encouraged, right? So you're fasting, you're abstaining from food and water, and you have the big shayateen that are locked away. You have more angels around you that are encouraging you, and most people tend to do more than they do anyways about with their rituals, with their faith, etc. in Ramadan. But pushing yourself in this month for 29, 30 days is encouraged, right? So kind of utilizing that this is a special time, and you're probably not going to use the rest of the year like you're going to use the days of Ramadan. That's a fact, right? And to expect to be using the rest of the year like you use Ramadan is not a real expectation. So but utilize the blessing of the day and the night to do as much good as you possibly can. So reading more Quran, making more dhikr, adding extra prayers, spending more in charity, going out and seeing if you can help somebody with an issue or a problem that they have, etc. Utilize your time to be as fruitful as it can possibly be. And again, we understand that you are going to have some downtime, you are going to have some naps, you are going to have some time where you're just kind of relaxing, because how much can you do, etc. It's fine, but you want to see a change in your day to include more good righteous things, not lessen the amount of righteous things and just let the time pass by, right? That's not what we want to get into the habit of. Things that actually will ruin your fasting. Number one, lying, right? Based on a text. So the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man lam yada' qawl az-zur wal 'amal bihi, falaysa lillahi haja fi an yada'a ta'amahu wa sharabahu." That whoever does not give up lying and acting upon lies, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no need for this person to give up their food or their drink. So if fasting is not improving your character, you're kind of missing the point of fasting, right? Yeah, the food and the drink and the abstinence, these are all things that we're doing physically, but the purpose is that when we physically do these things, we're showing ourselves we can choose to stay away from things that are halal. Well, what about the things that are haram in the first place, right? So our character should be improving. If it's not, we're kind of missing the point of fasting. We're just checking off the box that we fulfilled the ritual, but we're really not getting much more out of it, right? And so this is the real points of fasting coming in right now. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu said, "As-sa'im fi ibadah ma lam yaghtab musliman aw yu'dhihi." This is a companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and his narration of this is obviously known to come from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that the fasting person is in a state of worship as long as they do not backbite another Muslim nor cause them any harm. All right, so this is interesting. Now, you're fasting and you're considered to be in an act of worship, but the minute you start talking bad about somebody, unjustly and in a manner that is not appropriate, and backbiting is ذِكْرُكَ أَخَاكَ بِمَا يَكْرَهُ, is you mention something about your brother or your sister to somebody else that it doesn't, they don't have a stake, they don't need to know anything about them in the first place, and you are mentioning things that they would not like you to say about them if they were present. Right, and so you're saying this about them when they're not present. That is the definition of backbiting. And the Prophet ﷺ was asked, well, what if what we are saying is true? He said, if what you're saying is true, it's backbiting. It's bad enough, right? And if what you're saying is not true, فَقَدْ بَهَتَّهُ, then this is slander. It's even worse. You're not only are you talking about this person behind their back, you're lying about this person behind their back, right? So you have two things now that you've added on. And so this is something that we need to curb in the days of Ramadan. Number one, we need to be honest, no lying, making sure that anything we're engaged with in our lives, if we're financially, earning our wealth by telling lies, if you're basically a scam artist calling people up and scamming them, your fast, the spirituality of your fast is not worth much at all. And then obviously backbiting and any kind of character things that are bad for you are going to damage uh, your fast. Anas radiallahu anhu said, "Ma sama man dhalla ya'kulu luhum an-nas." The person who eats the flesh of people, meaning the person who backbites others, ma sama. He's not fasting. This is not because he's eating the flesh of other people, right? Backbiting is metaphorically likened to eating the flesh of your dead brother in the Quran. And so he's saying, how can a person be fasting while they're eating the flesh of their brother, right? And so this is something that we want to be mindful of. Cursing and abusing people, using bad language, being verbally abusive, emotionally abusive, physically abusive. These are all things that are going to render your fast probably useless. Because again, what is the point of fasting? To make you a better person. One of the things subhanAllah, we must bring this up, something that happens in Ramadan, which is extremely, extremely disappointing. Our domestic violence, advocacy organizations are people that are working on the front lines, helping victims of domestic violence in our community. In Ramadan, they get more calls than outside of Ramadan. And this is something that is beyond disappointing and beyond unbelievable. It's just, subhanAllah, it's disgusting. But if you are abusing someone verbally, emotionally, physically, outside of Ramadan, it's bad. It's wrong. It needs to stop, and that the person needs to be assisted and helped. But in Ramadan, while you're fasting, and sometimes using hunger and thirst as an excuse for anger and for abusive behavior, this is entirely, completely unacceptable. And this is something that's, again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't have any need for this kind of a person to give up their food and drink. What benefit are they? If you're earning sin while you're fasting, what is the point of your fast? And so we need to be mindful of this. So how we behave with other people is absolutely essential to our fast. It's the purpose why we fast. It's not just for ourselves. It's for how we come off, spiritually, how we improve spiritually, and how we improve in our community and in our families as well. So don't be cursing, abusing people. Don't be getting angry and enraged during the days of Ramadan. These are all things that will ruin the fast. And again, wasting time in mindless things will also ruin the fast. All right, let's get up to making up missed days. If you break your fast either intentionally or unintentionally by eating, drinking, something similar, you have to make up the day. If it was intercourse, then it has to be make up a day plus paying the kafara, which we talked about in the beginning of the video. And so eating, drinking, release of seminal fluids, etc., taking anything that's nourishing. If your fast ends up broken and you have to make up the day, how do you make up the day, right? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions وَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ, when he was mentioning some of the exceptions from fasting. Whoever is sick or they're traveling, then عِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ, then a number of other days, right? So whatever you miss in Ramadan, you can make it up the rest of the year before the next Ramadan comes around. You have that window of time. Basically, you have like 11 months to make up whatever you missed, 1 or 2 a week, or 10, 20, whatever days you missed of your fasting. You have 11 months to make that up. And we have this because Aisha radiallahu anha, she said in a hadith, and she narrates that كان يكون علي الصوم من رمضان فما أستطيع أن أقضي إلا في شعبان, that I used to have days that I had to make up from Ramadan, and I sometimes couldn't do it except in Sha'ban, meaning the month right before the next Ramadan. So, waiting until the next Ramadan is permissible. You have the window of time. Doing it as soon as possible is preferred, because you're getting it out of the way. You're not going to waste your response, but you have until the next before the next Ramadan to make it up. Aisha radiallahu anha narrates that she used to do the same. She couldn't make it up until that time because of whatever reason. Now, it's not okay to delay it past another Ramadan. So if you have 3 days or 5 days that you had to make up from this Ramadan, you have until Sha'ban the next year to make it up. But if another Ramadan comes, now you have to fast that Ramadan, and it goes, and you have fasts left over from a previous Ramadan. And the fuqaha here, based on some of the evidences and texts that we have, you make up those days as well as you have to pay the fidya, or you have to feed a poor person for each day of fasting that you're making up after having another Ramadan go by. I hope that was clear, and I'll say it again. So again, it is preferred to make up these days as soon as possible. To do that, doing them in succession is not necessary, but it is permissible to delay them until the next Ramadan, but not after the next Ramadan, unless it was for a valid reason. And I'll give an example here. Let's say you had one fast to make up in the Ramadan. You waited until Sha'ban. You had 2 days left of Sha'ban, and you were going to fast and make up that day. But now you fall sick and you cannot fast, and the Ramadan starts. Right now, you have an excuse for why you couldn't have fasted before the next Ramadan, because you were going to if you hadn't gotten sick, and so that's an excused reason. So you don't have to. You only have to just make up the day. You don't have to pay, or feed a poor person for the day, because you had the time. Allah has given you up until that day to make it up, and you couldn't because you were sick. So you would just only fast a day. But if there's no reason, meaning you just let the whole 11 months go by, the next Ramadan comes and you're like, oops, I have to fast like 5 days from the last Ramadan, then you have to make up those days as well as feed a poor person, because we're being careless now with our obligations to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the penalty goes up. For anyone that can't afford to do that, they would just make up the days. They don't have to do that, unless somebody can give them in sadaqah for them to kind of make up those days. Okay, I hope that was clear, inshallah. If it wasn't, please mention it in the comments, and I will repeat it in a different way so that it becomes clear, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, and I think we mentioned pregnant and nursing mothers in the first video about our last week's session about those that are exempt. And again, if any pregnant or nursing mother is finding fasting to be harmful, difficult, or if there is a fear either for her own health or for the health of her child, then it's fine for them to break the fast, meaning to not fast that day, and to make up at a later time in the year. And I think we did mention that. The same rules apply for making up the fast. Again, if there's no reason to delay it until next Ramadan, then they would just make up the day. If they had no reason, they missed the next Ramadan, then they would also have to pay the fidya, which is feeding a poor person for each day. All right, so that covers the fasting portion. Before I move on to the portion on Taraweeh, if there are any questions you guys have, please go ahead and plug them in the comments. I know it takes a little bit of delay from when I say things to when they reach you guys, so I'll wait a little bit. But go ahead and if you have any questions about things that break the fast or making up days, let's go ahead and get those addressed, inshallah. I think what I should do is probably make these notes available to you guys, inshallah. I can probably post them on my blog, and that way you can kind of refer to them quickly, inshallah ta'ala. All right, no questions, mashallah. Hopefully this is making sense to everybody. All right. If a question comes up while I'm talking, you guys can go ahead and plug it into the comments, and then we'll ask, inshallah. Or if you want to keep it private, you can email me, send me a direct message, etc. Using the tip of your tongue. I'm not sure I understand the question here. Using the tip of your tongue for tasting. Is that what's being asked? Tasting food, just since I brought it up, tasting food does not break your fast. It's not advised to do it during Ramadan unless you have a real reason to. That real reason comes from people that work in the culinary field, people that are chefs. Their job depends on how they prepare their food, etc. So some of the scholars, they address these questions from them, and so they say again, tasting food will not break your fast. Just like if you're using medication that you're applying to your teeth and your gums, etc. If you're not swallowing it, it's not going down your throat. it's not going to break your fast if it's absorbed in your mouth. Similarly, if you taste something on your tongue, it's not going down your throat, you're not actually eating it, it's not going to break your fast, and you can spit it out, etc. afterwards. But it's not advised to do. So if you don't have to do it, if you know, don't do it. Again, just out of caution that you might, take something uh, into your throat and down to your stomach. All right. Some of the other things that I think we mentioned intimacy in the very beginning. Kissing does not break your fast, and obviously, pecks, etc. The Prophet ﷺ is known to have, kissed his wives in the days of Ramadan, and it did not break his fast. But again, don't go overboard. All right, let's go to Taraweeh, inshallah ta'ala. Let's talk about Taraweeh. So, we are probably prepping for a Ramadan that is likely going to be, we're still going to be isolated from the masjid, and so we're expecting that, we're preparing for that, and that's going to definitely impact our Taraweeh, our ability to pray this prayer in this massive congregation that we do in the nights of Ramadan. We have hundreds of people that come every single night, stand for prayer. Many of them stay the whole night, so that we, as we finish the recitation of the Quran, etc., etc. But how can we still have Taraweeh if we're not going to have the masjid open? And so I want to talk about it because we all of us come to it in during Ramadan. In our previous Ramadans, we're already kind of familiar with what it is, but we want to talk a little bit about quickly what Taraweeh actually is, and with the perspective of you can perform it at home. That is actually how the Sahaba radiallahu anhum in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed Taraweeh. So Taraweeh is not anything different from Qiyamul Layl or Tahajjud, right? Technically speaking, it's the same thing. It's a night prayer. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed it 3 times in Ramadan in congregation. And how it happened was really interesting as well. He didn't announce it. He came out of his house in the nights of Ramadan one night, and he started his Qiyamul Layl. He started praying the night prayer that he would normally pray, and the people that were in the masjid, because it's Ramadan late at night, they joined him in their prayer. And Qiyamul Layl or Tahajjud or the night prayer can be prayed individually, and it can be prayed in congregation. Sometimes that some of the companions, younger companions, would spend, the night at the Prophet ﷺ's house, and they would, just so they could pray the night prayer with him outside of Ramadan, even, right? So he prayed this prayer. People prayed behind him. The next night, the people that prayed with him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, told people, "Hey, the Prophet came out and he prayed in the masjid that night. So wait in the masjid. Maybe he'll come out again tonight, and we can all pray with him again." And that happened another night, and then a third night as well. And then on the 4th night, there were more people gathered, but the Prophet ﷺ did not come out. He didn't mention anything. He didn't come out. They waited all night. He did not come out. He came out close to Fajr time, and they asked him, you didn't come out. We were waiting for you. If you came out, we would have prayed with you. We would have loved to pray with you. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said to them, "I didn't do it because I fear that you will take it as an obligation. I didn't want anyone to think that this night prayer in Ramadan is an obligation. It's a sunnah." So that is the mercy of Allah and the rahmah, and also the mercy of the Prophet ﷺ in the way that he legislated things for us. But the people would pray on their own, Qiyamul Layl, especially in the nights of Ramadan, right? And so the Taraweeh becomes something now that, after the Prophet ﷺ's death, it was carried on. Some people would pray it in their homes. Some people would pray it in the masjid. Many people were gathering in the masjid, and they were doing their small circles of maybe a few people here, a few people praying together there. And Umar radiallahu anhu, he noticed this, and he said, look, if we're all praying in the masjid anyways, why don't we just pray together behind one imam? And so he designated an imam, and he designated that they pray 20 raka'at, that he lead them in 20 raka'at. And they call it Taraweeh because Taraweeh means to take a break, to take a rest. After every 4 raka'at, they would take a break, they would take a rest, and then they would continue praying. Now, what's important to understand about Taraweeh, it's the night prayer. And so at home, during the days or the nights of Ramadan, if we cannot be in the masjid, we can pray that prayer at home, either individually or in congregation with our families. In congregation, it is better because any prayer in congregation is worth more. And again, this is the practice of the Muslims from very, very early on, from the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when he led the people in prayer, establishing that sunnah, to Umar radiallahu anhu gathering the people in the masjid as well. And so the Sahaba radiallahu anhu have validated it. So this is a sunnah prayer that we have. It's an important prayer that we have. So praying it at home with your family is a really, really good idea to kind of keep that momentum of Ramadan going. Now, do you have to pray 20 raka'at? Actually, I want to ask you guys this question. What is the correct number of raka'at for Taraweeh prayer? Go ahead and use the comments there. Because we have a debate sometimes in the community that is it 8 raka'at or is it 20 raka'at? Let's have some fun. What do you guys think? Don't be afraid to answer, guys. Fiqh is fun. This is how we learn. What is the correct number of Taraweeh? Of raka'at for Taraweeh? The correct. No one's going to dare to say a number? SubhanAllah. We have some non-controversial people on today. MashaAllah. MashaAllah. All right. So there is no set number of raka'at for Taraweeh, right? There is no set number. The Prophet ﷺ, his habit was praying between 8 to 10 raka'at of the night prayer. Umar radiallahu anhu gathered people on 20. Imam in the madhab of Imam Malik, it's known that they would pray 36 raka'at for Taraweeh, right? There's no set number for, and again, this goes back to the Prophet's teaching of Qiyamul Layl. He says, pray 2 rakat at a time until you fear Fajr is about to come. Then you do your witr prayer, which is your odd number 1 rak'ah of the prayer. But there's no set number. So you're not mandated to pray 20 rak'at, meaning you do not have to fulfill 20 rak'at of Taraweeh in order to be considered having prayed Taraweeh or the night prayer, etc. Whatever would be feasible and easy. Now, again, we do 20 because that is the practice of Umar radiallahu anhu. That is just something that's been easily formatted to pray with the community in order to finish the Quran in the month of Ramadan, etc., etc., making the length of standing not so long. These are the things that are to be considered, really. If you're praying with a group of people that want to stand for a longer time and they're all fine with it, then you can pray 8 raka'at and stand for a longer period of time. That's perfectly fine. You can do 10 raka'at, you can do 12, 14, 16, 20, you can do more than 20, you can do 30, you can do 40, you can do 60. You can, extend the number of raka'at as much as you. There's no set number that, if you meet it, you've met Taraweeh. If you don't, or you go above and beyond, that is not the case, right? And we know that from the different number of rak'at that the different schools of thought prayed and the different communities in the Muslim world prayed throughout the years. The purpose is to stand in the nights of Ramadan and recite Quran. The minimum is 2. The minimum is 2 rak'at, right? And the maximum is however many rak'at you want to do. The number of rak'at is not really the issue here. It's standing in the night for prayer and getting your family to stand with you. Now, again, we're talking about the kind of Ramadan we're likely going to go through this year. So you want to pray with your families. And you can gather your families together. If you have children, you can tell them, look, we're going to pray 4 raka'at as a family if you have really small kids, right? Or 8 raka'at as a family if you have older kids. You can kind of figure out what's going to be a good length of time for your family. And then you can lead your family in that in that prayer. And then if the kids get tired after a certain amount, they can go and do their thing. The spouses can continue to pray, or you can continue to pray individually as well. It's better if you guys pray together and you end that prayer with witr, and you do that for a good length of time, whatever would be an appropriate length of time for your family. You can decide that together as a family. So you can do maybe 8 raka'at, or 10 rakat, etc. But the length of time depends on how much of the Quran are you reading. So the other question that I want to ask you guys is it also do you have to finish the recitation of the Quran in Ramadan in Taraweeh in order for that to count as Taraweeh? Do you have to finish the Quran? What do you guys think? Mashallah, we got some really cautious people, mashallah. That's good. It's good. You do not have to finish the recitation of the Quran in Taraweeh in order for that to count as your Taraweeh. Again, it's about praying for a certain length of time. SubhanAllah, if you hear a little bit of rain, it just started raining here. SubhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it beneficial rain, inshallah. But you don't have to finish the Quran. It's not a mandate, right? It's not something you have to do. Now, it is something that has been passed down from the generations of our history. Imam Ahmad rahimahullah narrates he witnessed the prayer in Mecca. Sufyan ibn Uyayna, who was one of the imams of the Sunnah, early times of Islam we're talking about here, they would finish the Quran in the Taraweeh, in the prayer in Ramadan. And so that's something that has been passed down. It is a practice of the Muslims from generation to generation to generation, that in the Masjid, in the public gatherings, they do finish the Quran through the Taraweeh prayer, but it's not a requirement, right? So again, we're talking about our Ramadan with our families at home. What can we do? We can establish our own mini Taraweehs, we can pray with our families, and we can pray with them for a length of time that would be appropriate, doable, easy for them. Again, the kids can maybe pray 4 to 8 rak'at, etc., and then kind of move on. The adults can continue to pray longer, and then finish with their witr prayer. The kids can join for the witr prayer or pray on their own. It's fine, but you set the length of time that would be, again. So here's a couple of things to consider. Not something that's too easy, because the purpose is to exert some effort in worship, right? So not something that's too simple and too easy, and not something that's going to be burdensome and create a lot of weariness and tiredness, etc. So you want to kind of have a balance between the two. So you want to push yourself, but you don't want to overdo it, because you want to continue to push yourself consistently for the 30 days of Ramadan. So if you're going to push yourself so much that after 10 days you're going to be like, I'm going to take a break, I can't do this anymore, that defeats the purpose, right? So you want to push yourself just enough that you can keep that consistency going. And however many number of raka'at that is, whatever the length of time that is, you can set that. So generally speaking, Taraweeh lasts for about an hour and 45 minutes that we do in the Masjid, right? So it's about between under 2 hours. And so you want to kind of use that and with your family and say, okay, maybe an hour is a good time, maybe 45 minutes is a good time, maybe 30 minutes for the kids is a good time, etc. But you want to kind of schedule, you're flexible to schedule this out as it'll be comfortable, and still a little bit of push for your family, but not too easy, not too difficult, kind of a balance in between, right? And so you guys can absolutely pray Taraweeh at home with your families, and I intend on sharing more details about that, inshallah, before Ramadan comes around. Inshallah, preparing some graphics, documents, etc., just so you guys can use as resources and what to do. But again, we know that the standing in the nights of Ramadan, either after Isha or waiting until that last third of the night, the whole night, but praying in the nighttime in Ramadan is something that was encouraged by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the hadith in Sahih Bukhari and Muslim, he said, "Man qama Ramadana imanan wa ihtisaba, ghufira lahu ma taqaddama min dhanbihi." That whoever stands in Ramadan for prayer, with faith and expecting the reward of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever came before of their sins will be forgiven. And he said the same thing about fasting. So fasting is a means to forgive your sins of the past. Standing in prayer is a means to forgive your sins of the past. So the Taraweeh is an established prayer in Ramadan. It's an important prayer in Ramadan. We don't want to ignore it if the masjid is not open. We want to make sure we do it, but you can do it comfortably. You can do it as much as you can. Again, the minimum would be 2 rak'at, but we would say that is the absolute minimum, and that's not really we can all exert more effort than the absolute minimum, right? That's kind of what the picture I'm trying to paint here is. So, my recommendation for a minimum would be at least 8 raka'at. 8 raka'at, you stand as a family. With kids, maybe less, right? With kids, maybe 4 raka'at, extend the time of recitation so they're standing for a while. But at least for adults, it should be 8 rak'at. You're exerting some kind of effort. You do lose sleep in Ramadan. That's part of Ramadan, is losing sleep and not getting enough and kind of being tired, waking up early for suhoor. That's kind of the whole vibe we get in Ramadan. We should be putting that effort. It should not be like any other day, basically, right? That we normally have to do. So again, just a reminder. Now, you can also, in any of your non-obligatory prayers, it is fine to hold the mushaf or your phone or anything that you can read the Quran off of, right? It's fine to do that. And for the optional prayers, there's a difference of opinion between some schools, but we have a narration where Aisha radiallahu anha would have somebody lead her in salah, and they would hold something to read off of while they were doing that. And I think some of the schools of thought it's actually preferred to lead Taraweeh in the manner that you're actually reading from the text rather than just your own memory as well. So there's enough evidence out there to say it's fine. You can hold the mushaf in your hand. You can hold, they have these small, you get these like 30, the Quran broken down into like 30 juz or 30 paras, 30 parts already. It's easier to hold. You can do that. If you have your phone, you can do that. Just don't get distracted. Put on airplane mode or something. Don't be like texting while you're leading Taraweeh. It's also okay to follow along. So if you're praying behind someone that's leading, it's fine to also hold the mushaf, follow along. Just be mindful of where you put that mushaf in the rest of the motions of prayer. Again, we want to be respectful to the Quran and the mushaf as well. So don't put it on the floor. Have something, a chair, a pillow, or something that you can put it on top of when you're in ruku or sujood, etc. Be mindful of always respecting the Quran, but it's fine to hold the mushaf and read from it as well. So those are just some things on Taraweeh. Inshallah, we hope to share some more about Taraweeh as the weeks go on before Ramadan, so that you guys will have some resources, some more things to look at. And really quickly, I'll end just with Zakatul Fitr. Zakatul Fitr, the past few years, has been $10 per person. It is a charity that is mandated on anyone that can afford it, meaning anyone that does not need it themselves. Zakatul Fitr is supposed to be about what is called a sa' in the measurement of the Prophet ﷺ of the staple food of your land, right? And so that's kind of what it is. And so you're giving, it works out to being around 5 pounds. We're adding a little bit here, kind of saying that, but it works out to be about like 5 or a little bit more than 5 pounds of the staple food of your land. And you give that to the poor people. You would give that amount per person of your family to a family or a poor person that needs it, so that they don't have to be hungry on the day of Eid. That is the purpose of the Zakatul Fitr. We collect it from the moment Ramadan starts. We start collecting it. The past few years, it's been $10 per person, and then we distribute that to the needy Muslims in our community, around our community, in our state, in the form of either food packages or grocery cards, so that they can go and purchase the food that they themselves need. This is how we at RCM at least distribute the Zakatul Fitr. And so you just want to make sure, if you're going to pay your zakat anyways, you're someone that's not in need yourself, then you will pay that amount per person in the family, and that obligation is only for the person that is earning for the family, the person that is the one responsible for earning for the family, head of the household. Generally speaking, that is the father figure, or the husband, or the man who is responsible for, Islamically responsible for providing for the household. They would pay that zakat on behalf of every member of their family. Whether or not you pay it for a child in the womb, there's difference of opinion. Out of caution, you can, but you don't have to pay it for the child in the womb. But anyone that's a living member of, or a present member of your family outside of the womb, you would pay it for them, but you can pay it on behalf of any unborn child that is still in the womb of their mother. But again, $10 per person. The best way to disperse of it is to actually deliver those food packages, grocery cards yourself to someone a Muslim that is needy. All of the obligatory charities are distributed to Muslims, because this is an obligation for us to support our brothers and sisters in Islam. Optional charities can go to anyone. Obligatory charities go to our brothers and sisters in Islam. And so the best way to do it is to actually take it physically yourself to the person that needs it. You yourself are dispensing of that zakat, but it's perfectly fine to give it to organizations like the Masjid or other organizations that will then dispense and move it forward for other people. At RCM, we distribute this locally. SubhanAllah, I think, and I can't remember the number we shared on this, but we between $12,000 to $16,000 is what we I think distributed last year for Zakatul Fitr, and we distribute it, meaning we get that out to people that absolutely need it. And so all that $12,000 to $16,000 that comes in within a month, it's gone. It has to go because it's zakat. We can't keep that money. It absolutely has to go. Again, so we do distribute that locally. You can distribute it locally. You can give it to organizations for refugees, anyone, so there are a lot of good causes to give it to, but you want to make sure you give it absolutely before the day of Eid. It has to be given before the day of Eid, and you can start giving it out as early as the beginning of Ramadan, insha'Allah ta'ala. That is all I had to cover for the rest of part 2. Alhamdulillah, we kept it to 1 hour. Alhamdulillah. If you guys have any questions, plug it into the comments. If you don't want to ask it publicly here, you can always email me, imam@roswellmasjid.org. You can message me on, if you have me on Facebook, you can message us on Facebook as well from RCM. If you want to be more, again, you can find me on Instagram. You can message me there. So I'm available online through multiple means for you guys to reach out, inshallah. We had very few questions today, mashallah. I was expecting more about breaking the fast. وَإِيَّاكُمْ to all the Jazakumullah khairans. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put immense barakah in y'all's day. And inshaAllah this Ramadan comes over us and we are ready to prepare for it again. The Ramadan workshop is on the 18th. So, we're going to address more of how to go through Ramadan during quarantine on the 18th. Inshallah, today was just more about the rules and regulations, etc. Of that. But join us on the 18th. Inshallah, we'll have Sheikh Yasir Birjas, Ustad Fatima Let. We'll have a nutritionist on board with us, Sister Yaqutullah Muhammad, and Dr. Asim Kidwai, inshallah, physician as well. So we'll have some good recommendations and a good opportunity to ask a lot of questions. Wa alaikum assalam. Also, guys, just since we talked about Zakatul Fitr, if you have the capacity, inshallah, please keep donating to, go to RCM's website, donate to our Sadaqah and Zakah funds. There's more of a need to distribute now to our needy families, and so we are collecting, because we're actually distributing a lot more than we normally do. People are affected in their work, etc. So please do donate so we can continue to help our communities, and also donate to the Masjid because we still have to, pay a lot of the Masjid expenses. Just because the Masjid is closed, we still have to kind of get certain things out of the way, inshallah. So please make sure you guys are helping us with that. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.